Sometimes the whole idea is valuable, sometimes a couple of lines, sometimes nothing.
Look, rugged too, crisp action, fine balance, precision accuracy. Just pick one up and point it.
Let's start the official business of the annual general meeting. Okay, first off, I've got an agenda, but I'm afraid I can't put it up on the board because that is occupied by our new website. Round of applause.
For instance, the screenplay is not intended as a public document. It generally remains unpublished and is not necessarily produced, and the supposed end product, the film, bears faulty witness to it, I write.
I appreciate you. I appreciate your support. That's my experience.
If I can add something to that, even in those days, not many of the screenplays have been factory filmed. Most of them were rejected because of this.
Okay, it's not the complete website. I'll come to that a bit later on, okay, but and give you the story on that. However, the other reason why we don't have the agenda on the board is that I couldn't find the relevant program to type it up and put it on the board. So let me just tell you what it is. First off, I'm going to hand over to our returning officer to tell you what the final arrangements are for the election and for voting for the new Executive Council. Once he's finished his small speech, then I'll carry on with the coordinator's report. That's me, and I'll tell you what's happened over the last year.
Thousands have been made. Thousands will be. But the oldest gun makers in America still build them one at a time. Maintaining the gunsmith's ancient art in a modern world requires sophistication. The sophistication of computers, in fact. A gun designer can draw up the ideal firearm, but can you then duplicate that on the factory floor? One way, the best way, is to feed the design into a computer. Then the computer knows the gun too.
Further, the screenplay's readership is limited and generally expert, unlike the novels, say. For the rest of this paper, I draw on my current project of producing a scholarly volume of the 6 screenplays that William Faulkner wrote while under contract to 20th Century Fox through 1936 and 1937.
He was even working with his colleagues because usually he was also a teacher at the Ritz Film School where we were last year for the conference. But even then, it was very often painful relationship between filmmaker and the director.
Excuse me for writing like a school report, a fecundity of imagination, but it seems to operate rather without organic sense. And he would probably say just like that. Anderson also touched on an important thematic through line for the screenplay and more than hinted at what the film should be about. The British public school system, Anderson wrote, is a strange subworld with its own peculiar laws, distortions, brutalities, loves, and its special relationship to a perhaps outdated conception of British society. Both Seth and John Holt were to part company with the project when the screenplay began to change and develop in directions they didn't like. But for Sherwin and Anderson, the collaboration became very fruitful. By now, Anderson had begun to feel personally involved in Crusaders and suggested he and Sherwin carry on working on the script with, and this is interesting, no thought of pleasing anyone but ourselves. Wouldn't that be wonderful? This last point is important in that Sherwin developed the screenplay with complete imaginative freedom and without the constraints of any development deal. As Anderson himself was to later write, If was well and truly in the tradition of
and can spell out specs and instructions for machinery with a precision no human being could match. Tied into an automatic drafting machine, the computer draws the receiver
So this is made for Britain in the First World War. They also made guns for France, and they made them for the Russian Imperial Army until the revolution, the period and the provisional government refused to honour the contracts. So then they got all of this government compensation. But the manufacturer continues. So this ability to build apparently unique items for different markets in the same factory has of course been massively upscaled in electronics production in China today. But it begins in World War I munitions manufacture. And the poor typewriter itself became a casualty of war. This is a Lee Miller picture called, as you see, Remington Silent, which is actually a little play on an actual model of Remington called Remington Noiseless. And this was part of a series of photographs that she took to document the bombing in London in 1940. Now, while this was happening, and because of it, we can say a new technological world was being born.
And just to quickly name those properties, Wooden Crosses, Banjo on My Knee, Last Slaver, Splinter Fleet, and Drums Along the Mohawk. And Fox owned the rights to another script he wrote, The Left-Hand God, although he didn't write, Faulkner did not write that one under contract with Fox.
Narrated, which combines elements of the dramaturgically, it's very hard to spell some words which are very close to German. Which combines elements of the dramaturgically closed narration with the open form.
Алексей Алексеевич Иванов, гвардии сержант, убывал из армии по демобилизации. Близкие друзья и товарищи поехали с Ивановым на железнодорожную станцию и, попрощавшись там окончательно, оставили Иванова одного.
Bureaucratic capitalism. In the management narratives, the main topic is starting to be change.
Is it later than that? 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, is it 4:30?
No, that's the real time. Once it is the real time.
No, but this here, by the real time.
No, this is the real time.
No, but 22:35 by real time, it means 4:30 in the morning.
This external war is an operation to control the movements of human masses and populations. This war does not aim to control human bodies in space. It is an operation to control the possibilities of human action, to control the human intellect and communication, to control the movement of minds. It operates with what we can do, say, and think.
And
Yeah.
a funny one.
It ended up like that. It's ended up like
The
that.
issue is interesting in that sense, that if, in a sense, the screenplay
My
isn't
title
fixed,
is The Function of a Character Goal in Ari Tarkovsky's sixth film, Nostalgia. And my approach is dramaturgical. And dramaturgy for me means that it is all the choices in building up a cinematic presentation of the curative experience.
Play. Outlying characters and relationships remain appallingly fluid, Anderson wrote. Nonetheless, Anderson agreed to meet with the young writers in a pub in Soho called the Pillars of Hercules. They don't call pubs that anymore, do they? What a shame. This was the beginning of the collaboration, as Anderson then agreed to offer feedback on the raw script. Anderson wrote a letter to the writers from Warsaw where he was directing John Osborne's play Inadmissible Evidence, by the way, in Polish.
So I was working on an article around this whole process of adaptation. So that date, by the way, is the British publication. The actual novel, which is a Richard Yates novel, was actually published in 1960. I think it was finished in 1960. Actually, being published in 1961. I'm sure there are people here who might correct me on that. But that's when it was published in Britain. So.
One more question, I think I might get to Adrian.
Yes, congratulations on the success of your film. It's a wonderful film. I have a question which formulated in my mind near the end of the film as I was watching it, which was, as a musical, I was expecting a scene that actually is not there, which is a big musical scene, and I was expecting a big performance with the troops, you know, blah, blah, blah. The big musical moment that in a sense would give you the idea that, you know, that they might go on to great world success, but in fact the trajectory of the film is that they will return home, you know, and so that big musical scene is not there. I'm wondering how you grappled with that question.
Yeah, look, again, we wanted to bring the story back home, you know. I think the song they sing at the end, which is Sugar Honey Bunch, is kind of uplifting, but yeah, there isn't that set piece, big genre finish. I think in a way we imagined that the song, you know, spoiler, but the song that Gail sings towards the end of the movie, I suppose we thought that emotionally took care of that. I think the choices we made were in terms of the emotional arc of the story rather than the genre concerns for a big finish. Because we were grappling with the fact that, in fact, they did go to Vietnam, they did tour in Australia, but they didn't go on to worldwide success, you know, and we'd sort of made a rod for our back kind of suggesting that earlier on. So it felt a more powerful emotional journey for Kay to come home and for them to sing for their own community around the firelight than to do that big finish, you know, the big finish number. But it's we did grapple with that a little bit, but I mean, Tony was, and yeah, we did have a closing scene where they had gone on to kind of international success and were singing at the Apollo